Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here. This is a terrific session. As those of you who are here know, Adam already complimented you on your endurance being here for the last session on the last day. Let me add to that compliment your good taste in joining us for this session. This is really, really terrific. I want to talk about what everybody has mentioned, pretty much, the ultimate archiving of these digital files, and show you a place where if you've got digital data that you want to make accessible and you want to ensure that it's preserved and available for the long term, we've got a repository for you. So as Deb mentioned, I'm the executive director of the Center for Digital Antiquity, which is currently located at Arizona State University. We have a relatively, we have a simple, straightforward mission, and that is to preserve and provide access to information about archaeological investigations, resources, and related topics. Something I think we can all agree needs to be done. We want to enhance the management of resources so that they are preserved. We want to improve research about archaeology, archaeological topics of a wide range of sources through easier access to the wealth of information that exists, ensure that information is in fact preserved, and hopefully, in the big picture, create knowledge and improve knowledge about the past. Now, we've heard a lot of, in all the presentations, why is something like TDAR or TDAR itself valuable to you? Well, as researchers and research institutions, it'll preserve and help you to organize your data. It'll make your data easily accessible, both to yourself and to others. And it also enables you to control access to that information, to those data. So if you want to limit the access to a smaller group of people, you can do that in TDAR. If you want to make it generally available publicly, you can do that in TDAR. If you want to be the only person that can actually access those data, you can do that in TDAR. There's a continuum of ways of managing access. And your data are discoverable. TDAR is indexed by Google, by Bing, by other of the standard search engines, so people can find it. You can go to TDAR, you can go to the website and do your search there and find your data. You know it's there, or you can send somebody directly to TDAR. But if somebody's out there looking around for something and they don't know a thing about TDAR, but they're interested in your data and you've got some keywords in your metadata that you've put into TDAR, they'll be able to find it through Google or Bing or other types of search engines. For researchers and research institutions, again, if you're an organization and you want to manage your data, TDAR is a place where you can do that, where your data, again, can be accessible. If you're a university or a library or a funder, you can preserve the information of your staff, your faculty, or your researchers. If you're a funding organization like NSF or NEH, in fact, they know about TDAR and they've recommended that people use TDAR, and we've got relationships with a number of grantees from those funding organizations as well. And then for everybody, why is it valuable? Well, I think you would find, if you looked at it and compared what it would cost you to create this kind of a repository on your own, if you're not particularly one of the big projects that, as Bill was talking about in the first presentation, it's going to be cost effective to use another service. This is basically a service that we're providing. And we can do it in a very cost effective way. And this is the sort of thing where there really is a real economy of scale, so that not everybody has to have their own digital archivist and their own set of programmers and their own planners or digital curators. For a certain scale of project, TDAR, we think, can provide an excellent solution to the issue of long-term preservation and long-term access for data. And this is an extremely redundant couple of slides here. Everybody's talked about the deluge of data. So we've talked about it in archaeological terms, but of course, in terms of the overall deluge of data, archaeology is a real small little piece of that. So there's a lot of this data out there. There's big data on climate, there's big data on medicine, there's all sorts of other disciplines at the scale of archaeology as well. So we're not alone in this, and in fact that's a good thing because it gives us some tools to use that other people have developed, and it can show us ways forward if we're aware of what we're doing, which is another reason for actually using a kind of specialized service like TDAR, because we can continue to keep ourselves apprised of that sort of thing and try to move things forward because we're aware of what's going on in other areas. We're not just focused on an archaeological research project or the archaeology of a particular part of the world or something like that. And again, redundancy, the tens of thousands of archaeological projects, thousands of images just in a single project. Adam mentioned they took 22,000 images the last field season or something like that.
Over the course of 5, but still.
It's a lot. It's a lot of images, and it's easy to do, and yet it's hard to keep straight, as he showed, the information about each one of those images, and that's an important challenge for all of us. So what are the digital curation challenges? Well, one is that digital data are not accessible, generally speaking. I mean, you may be able to, you are able to access your own project data, you may be able to access data from a few other projects that you know the PIs of or other people who are doing research, but in general, archaeological projects don't move the digital data into a place, into a repository where they can be accessible. In addition to that, few institutions, and we've heard about some today that do this, but they are among the few institutions that actually do provide for digital curation, ensuring access and ensuring long-term preservation. Frequently, what we found, and we actually did a survey of about 250 repositories in the United States, frequently the media, you know, the flash drives or the CD or the hard drives are treated as artifacts. And, you know, of course they are, because the curators that you typically hand them over to, you hand them over to them when you hand them the objects that you've collected and the paper records, and they treat them like they treat the objects in the paper records. They go on the shelf. They're well cared for. You know, those artifacts will be there. Unfortunately, of course, the data on them won't, because, you know, in 5 or 10 or 15 years, little pieces of data actually fall off those things. And even if they didn't, how are you going to access that? You're going to have to drive to the repository, pull the CD off the shelf, find a computer with the drive in it that you can actually fit the thing in, and then hope that the software on the computer actually can read it. And increasingly, with the development and improvements in software and hardware, those last two factors are not going to be possible. So we have to come up with a different way of dealing with digital curation. Digital data are terrific. We've seen, I mean, just in the PowerPoint slides, we've seen examples of how much information can be shared and how easily it can be shared with digital data. But they're also fragile, and they're not automatically preserved. There's media degradation, there's software obsolescence, and there's the loss of information about the data, and we've seen some terrific examples of all of those kinds of things so far. Digital curation requires specialized knowledge, procedures, and skills. I sometimes say, or we say around the office, you know, it's not rocket science, but it's different. It's not something that archaeologists are trained in, and nor should we necessarily want to be. There's a whole different language, there's a whole different way of looking at things that we need to access ourselves and be part of. But we all don't have to have our own digital repository that does all of these things. We can, in fact, make use of something like TDAR as a repository where all these things happen. So some of the kinds of things that I'm talking about here, just in a simple way, is that if you put a file into TDAR, you upload a file into TDAR, we check it. We check it on a regular basis, and we make sure that the file doesn't degrade, doesn't deteriorate. And if it does, we take the original file that we got and we check it and we make sure that it's still good, and then we replace the degraded file with it. We plan to migrate files as they become obsolete, file format. So, you know, PDF-A is one of our standards right now. It's a general standard. Bill, I think, actually said that small projects that are oftentimes limited to off-the-shelf software. But in fact, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because so are most other people and most other organizations. So you can be sure that there is going to be a major migration of PDF to whatever comes next, because people in medicine, people in law, people in other parts of scientific and humanistic research, all of them have millions of PDF files that they are going to want to be sure can in fact be accessed and utilized 10, 15, 25 years from now. So we will all be part of that migration, and that's one of the things that if you put something into TDAR, we're committing to do that. So we're planning for that kind of change in software file formats. Also for obsolete technology. So we're using servers right now. The next piece of technology that comes along will be moving along to that sort of technology. We maintain the files and the programming in TDAR in open and preferable formats, and we link a rich metadata, descriptive metadata, between the stored files and the records, the TDAR records that you create when you upload something. So we protect your files for the future. If you've got confidential site information in some of those reports that you put in, or in your data set, or in your image, we can protect access to that so that it can be limited to only those people that should be able to see that. You control the access, and we ensure that the metadata about the files stays with the file, so that we don't have the kinds of problems that some other folks have discovered as they've gone back and looked at either paper records or earlier computer formats. In terms of access, I mentioned we have a graduated kind of access. In general, our default, if you put something into TDAR, unless you mark it as confidential, it will be publicly accessible, which means that individuals that go in and search TDAR and they find a record of an archaeological report, they'd see the metadata automatically as a result of their search, and they'd have an opportunity to download the file unless you've marked it in some way as confidential. If you've marked it as confidential, when you do the upload, you have the opportunity to identify other registered TDAR users who can access the file. So you can, when you upload it, you could identify a small research group or a large research group of individuals who could access it, but then no one else could see the actual file. They could see the metadata. The metadata are public, so people know that you're working on it, which is a good thing, because there may be somebody out there who you would actually want to know you're working on a certain thing, and then they could be in touch with you because they had seen your metadata record in TDAR. And then, of course, those of us who administer the system, we do have access. So this is a hypothetical I get on a regular basis when I talk about TDAR. What if somebody puts something into TDAR and then they die, and they've marked it confidential? Could nobody ever access it? Well, yes, people can access it. We can access it. So in those situations, we'll figure out what the right approach is. One of the reasons that we are able to provide these guarantees of migration of file types and file formats as software improves is that we do have standards. So while we include in TDAR right now, if you have a document, you can upload it. You have a data set, image, or a scan of some sort. But we do have certain requirements. So if you have an old WordStar document, you can't upload that. But if you can convert it to a Word document or to a PDF, you can upload it then. Those are our standards. Those are our kinds of standards right now. And there's a list of those, and I won't go through all of them. But we do try to, in fact, there was a discussion, a very useful discussion earlier about standards. And I think most of that discussion was about really archaeological terminology, which is an important factor for all of us, of course. But there's also, digital format standards, and there's a wide range of possibilities out there. There's a lot of specialized or idiosyncratic tinkering that people have done, even with some of the off-the-shelf. We're trying to actually adhere to some of those off-the-shelf versions when they're good, when they're open source, where possible, and where they're in good, written for archive type standards. So that's what we look for in selecting our standards for file types. The other key thing about a repository is that it is sustainable. If you put something in today or tomorrow or the next day, you want to know that 50 years from now, somebody else is going to be able to get it. And that's what we are striving for with TDAR. We're not an archaeological project which has a beginning and an end, typically. We are, in fact, something that we hope will continue on into the future, and we've built our business plan with that in mind. So we've got a dedicated and entrepreneurial leadership, we hope. I'm here representing some of that leadership, so I certainly hope we are both of those things. But we are dedicated. In other words, I'm not teaching at ASU, and I'm not doing standard archaeological research at ASU. I am running the Center for Digital Antiquity, and the main thing we do is develop, maintain, and build TDAR. That's our focus. We have a clear value proposition, I think, and I've tried to summarize some of that in the earlier points in some of these slides. We try to keep our costs down. There is cost to this, though. And so we are developing a diverse range of revenue sources. Now, this list of bullets is actually taken from a very helpful report about sustainability and digital information that the Ithaca S&R research firm, which is was started by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation and looks at these kinds of issues, mainly in the humanities, but not exclusively. So this is their list of the kinds of things you need to look at for sustainability. And they've listed a long list of potential revenue sources. We're trying to utilize as many of those as we can. What we are not doing right now, and what we hope we won't have to do to establish a stable revenue source, is charging for access. So access to information in TDAR, there's no cost. The cost comes when you do the deposit. So when people put resources into TDAR, we will be charging a modest set of fees for that. I'm showing you this, although this is not necessarily our very final list, but it is something that we're working on right now. So if you wanted to put one file, a document, into TDAR, and it's 10 megabytes or less, we would charge you $50. If you've got a large number of files, the cost per file goes down. If you've got a very large number of files, pick up the phone or send us an email, and we'll talk about what kind of costs we might do. But these costs are what is necessary to cover the continuation, the sustainability of the project. We have a number of clients already. These are the logos of some of those clients. These are organizations that have put information files into TDAR, or for whom we are putting files into TDAR under contract, with a contract from them. It's a wide range of institutions. There are public agencies here, there are research programs, there are CRM firms, and there are some of our other colleagues, like the Archaeology Data Service that other people have mentioned as well, as another kind of a repository in the UK. This is what TDAR looks like right now. This is the home page. If you go to the home page right now, this is what you would see, and you would have the opportunity here to either log in if you're already a registered user, or to register, which is very simple. Just need a email address and and you create a password. Or if you don't want to register, you can still browse. So you could put in a search term there, and you would be able to browse through the database and find maybe a topic or a site name or an area of the world or a type of investigation that, that you could then look at the metadata records for. You wouldn't be able to view it, though, or download it until you did register, because as part of registration, you agree to certain kinds of behaviors. You agree to give credit if you use any of the data that you download. You agree that you're not going to misuse it in a way that would damage the archaeological record. So there are some kinds of sort of self-registration affirmations that you need to provide. What's in TDAR so far? Well, mostly information about documents right now, and there are over 360,000 records related to documents. Now, most of those are just citation information, and in fact, most of them relate to the United States. But as you can see, there is information from TDAR from other parts of the world, and I'll actually show you some examples from the Mediterranean area, since I know that's of particular interest to many of you. In addition, images, there are over 7,500, data sets, about 400, and then a much smaller number of 3D scans. And then projects in TDAR is another kind of organizational tool that you can create. One of our clients, the Archaeology Lab at the University of Missouri, in the last 2 years has put in a backlog of neutron activation analysis tests that were done by the old Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory in California, and many of those analyses are actually from the Mediterranean area. So those are all into TDAR now. If you're, so you might want to do a search if you were trying to access that information, which is basically inaccessible in any other way at this point. We also have the University Museum Press. We've put into TDAR for them supplemental information from a number of their technical reports. So the CDs, if you've got any of those volumes, they have a CD in the back. Well, you may still be able to read that, and then you've got it already. But if you don't, you can go to TDAR, whether or not you have the book, and get the supplemental information. So there may be some information there that would be of interest. This is just a map that shows the locations of some of the projects that are in TDAR from this general part of the world. Some of these are, in fact, associated with that University of Missouri and Lawrence Livermore data set that I mentioned. That's an example of that. So, in addition to being an archive where you can put your data so it can be kept properly and accessible and preserved for the long term, TDAR is also a research tool. And I don't really have time to talk about the ways in which you do that, but I do want to mention one particular thing, because we talked about data sets. And TDAR actually has a tool within it that enables you to bring together data sets to create ontologies, basically translations between variables in data sets. I refer to that as advanced TDAR. And I have some colleagues who have been doing a lot of work on that, but I myself have not. But I do want to let you know that does exist, and it's something you can take advantage of. And as somebody else mentioned with another example, I think it was John actually in closing, TDAR is also a tool you can use for teaching and showing students how to actually use real archaeological data or real archaeological reports. So thank you very much for your attention. Thanks to the organizers for including us. And these are some of the supporters who have helped us to get this far.
Excellent, excellent. Well, let's give 3 minutes for questions from the audience. I see somebody in the back.
Your clients all seem to be institutions.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Your clients all seem to be institutions. I'm dealing with a project where I have a group of about 5 retired professors who have information from a site they dug 30 years ago, and they now just want to get it out into the public.
Right.
They don't want to have to deal with it. They want to just get it out, but they don't want to have to pay for the rest of their lives.
Right.
So is this a type of situation that would work for them?
well, it would. We would have to figure out a way to fund it.
Right.
But absolutely, yes. In fact, we've got a couple of examples of that sort of thing. Some of you may know Dean Snow from the University, Penn State University. He's actually an Americanist, but he was the president of the Society for American Archaeology for a term. He's put a lot of his research archive into TDAR. It mainly relates to New York State, but yes, absolutely, that kind of thing is entirely possible and feasible, and I'd be happy to talk with you in more detail about what might be possible, what the costs might be. Okay.
Mary?
So in your list of revenues and so forth, and one of those lines was endowment, and there was
Yeah.
something written next to it, but do you have a plan to create an endowment for this?
Yes, we do. In fact, part of the costs that I showed you, a percentage, it's about 2% or 5% depending upon the level, we're putting aside into an endowment so that we can then have that to tide us over when things are a little slow and to do the migration, because the costs that we're talking about are a one-time cost. So we do have to take into account in that cost the future attention we're going to have to give to those files and what we'll continue to do with them. But that's our plan right now. We were very fortunate in having a couple of large grants from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation to actually create the software program, build the organization, and build TDAR content so far. As I said, we do have revenue already from certain organizational clients, and we are needing to start the general upload charge for anyone now to put things in. But I will tell you, just between us here in the room, those prices are probably not going to go in effect for a couple more weeks. So if you go to TDAR right now, if you've got a document or a data set that you really like, or you just want to try it out, go for it. But now's the time to do that, because in a couple weeks, before you did the upload, there'd be a little screen that came up and it said, it would say, how many files are you going to upload? And you would say 1, and it would say, okay, deposit $50, give us your credit card number. So you can avoid that in the next couple weeks if you want to give it a try.
Bill?
Just have
Oh,
a
sorry.
second part of the question. Will the university manage that endowment for you? Is that the plan?
Right now, we are administratively under ASU, and so any funds are administered by the university through their financial and accounting systems, which is great. The deal with the university is for the next 5 years or so, and at that point, hopefully we've got our revenue stream going and everything, and we would make a decision about whether we would hive off as a separate, not-for-profit, standalone organization, whether we might become associated with another organization, or whether we might become associated with another university, or whether we might just stay right there in Tempe, because the university has been supportive. We get space from them that we're not having to pay for, but really all the other costs we're picking up. So it's a real, our sustainability model is real. We do have a business plan that we're implementing, and that's ultimately the way that the whole thing will be managed.
Bill and then Sebastian.
I was wondering how you anticipate the funding model affecting the character of the data. But I was thinking, okay, if it's $50, for example, $50 a document, the first thing I would do is put all of my annual field reports into one document, up to the maximum amount you could possibly have. Like
That would be 10 megabytes.
Right. So I wouldn't parse it in any way. I wouldn't organize my data in an archaeologically or sort of sophisticated way, because it would be all about the economy, right?
Right.
Do you anticipate? And one could imagine that with maps. One could imagine that, just.
Right. We've been talking about that all the time for the last 6 months, and so what we're hoping is that people won't actually try to game the system. That they'll put it, they'll put things into TDAR, create files that are sensible and usable, because the idea, part of the idea is access. So you want to put things in that people are going to be able to take out and actually make sense of.
Sebastian has something to add to
So
that.
I didn't quite hear everything that goes through, but I think my question may follow up on that. To what extent, by charging per file and determining the sort of semantics of the data that you get. So I think Adam, it may be possible that he has individual Dublin core files for everything, and I frequently do that myself. So this is not in any ways a complaint, but I can imagine a well-structured database coming in as 50,000 different files because I am describing 50,000 objects, but each one of those files will be very small, and the total database might be 2 megabytes. And when I get a pop-up and I fill in 50,000, can I actually get on the phone and say, wait a second, there's a mismatch between how you're conceiving the data and how we're conceiving the data? But more generally, to what extent, how do you not predetermine the semantics, the structure, the thinking behind data when you mediate it through a cost structure?
Well, that's why if you've got a very large number of files and or a very large amount of storage that you need, that's where we say pick up the phone, give us a call, let's talk about what you're trying to do and how we can provide the kind of service that you need. We're actually this discussion is going on right now,
sure.
Not with a database like that, but with scans. We've got a potential client who wants to scan it. He's got over 100,000 photographs, and they actually want to create 3D models. And so that's, those are lots of files, but the real problem there is that it's lots of storage space. Now we can buy storage spaces as cheaply as anybody, but we're not just selling storage space. We're selling these other services. So we have to figure out how does providing that kind of storage space fit with just the kind of details you're talking about, with the metadata that's going to be maintained, with the systematic checking that occurs, and with the ultimate migration to whatever the next platforms are.
Okay,
so
Adam,
all that needs to be
last
taken
question.
into account.
This is related to what has just been discussed, but what was being said made me realize one of the things I think is going to happen in archaeology in the short term, in about the next 5 years, is that everybody is going to start doing computational photography. Everybody is going to start making 3D models from photographs. And you get two things there. You get a whole bunch of photographs, and you get an actual model file. And in terms of what you are depositing, from an archival perspective, you have to deposit the original photographs because you don't know what has been done to them to make the other thing. However, if I'm faced with a choice between a $5,000 deposit of the original photographs and the thing, or a $50 deposit of the thing, I will give you the thing because I don't have $5,000. So I think that it's a very specific use case, but it's going to be more and more common over the next few years, and it's one that is worth considering pretty seriously.
Well, and I want you to know that we are, and we're looking forward to working with users or potential users in doing that kind of thing. The other thing that people need to think about too, one thing Adam said, made this point in his talk, start planning early as to where your digital information is going to go and work with the repository on that and try to figure out what's the best way to do it. The other thing is, you don't necessarily have to archive all 20,000 photographs over a 5-year period. You can in fact cull those, and you should actually, to ensure that you get a photograph that you think is truly representational, and then you have rich metadata associated with it, but you might not need 2 copies of it, although you took 2, or you took 3, or you took 4, to make sure that you get a file when you originally did it. So some pre-culling by the investigators is also a part of this process of creating a digital archive that's useful.
We're going to have to hold off on questions and discussion for a little while because we do have a discussant. Sort of
Postcards in the back
together.
if you want to get some more information about TILA.
Postcards in the back.
Thank you.
I'd like to introduce Lucy Stylianopoulos, who is the head of the Arts Library